And so we are on Friday morning once again. Doesn't the time fly, Pat? See, when you're having fun, I just find
Absolutely.
time goes zoom. In fact, it's going a bit
Aye.
like my life. I look at my
Aye.
life and I say, I'm only 18. Oh, no, I'm not 18. I'm a bit older.
Jude, my dad used to once famously said, life is like a stream. It starts up in the mountains and with a wee trickle, and it's like your youth. And by the time you reach old age and the stream is rushing to the sea, it's going like 100 miles an hour.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
It speeds up.
Yeah.
I think our creator made a mistake in terms of his design of us. He should have made it the other way around. He should have started off, that Benjamin Button movie. Start off very old and work your way to being really young and then just vanish. So I quite like that.
Was it George Bernard Shaw said youth was wasted on the young?
Oh,
there's a lot of truth in that. You never realize
true.
how lucky you are when you're 18. Yeah.
Aye, that's right. There used to be somebody I knew whose aunt told her, she says her aunt was always, she said this when we were both young. She says her aunt was always saying to her, enjoy yourself when you're young. And I remember maybe thinking, what a fucking stupid thing to say. You have a good time when you're old and when you're. She was fucking right. I shouldn't have said that, should I? Anyway, what are we going to talk about today, Pat? What's
there's
important?
Only one topic, Jude. Or well, there's two or three actually, but there's only one in Northern Ireland, isn't there?
Yes, and that is the downfall of. Well, it looks like a downfall of Stormont, doesn't it? Putz was the John the Baptist of the affair, wasn't he? He went 24 hours before anybody else.
Here's a question for: Did he go on a solo run and then the DUP had to come in behind him, or was it all coordinated? I am still not sure which is the true version.
Hard to know. I suspect that it was a coordinated thing, but it could be, you see, that Putz made a solo run, remember, as his mate.
Yeah.
And it might be that he followed suit and then Donaldson was drawn into it. Donaldson, remember, only a few days ago was talking about February the 21st as being the date. And suddenly, it's ahead. But the important thing is not so much what they're thinking. Was it individual thinking or group thinking or party thinking? The important question is, why did they do it? And what will be the effects of it? Why do you think they did it, Pat?
Jude, when I sat and listened yesterday on what do you call the program in the evening, radio, BBC News. It started at 4:00. Declan Harvey and Joel Taggart. I listened to it quite regularly. I listened to the entire speech from Donaldson, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, and Jude, that was not a speech other than an election speech. It was an election speech all day long. The DUP are not this. The pretext of all this is the protocol. And by the way, I understand unions have got a thing about it. Of course they have. But this is all about positioning the DUP. They're looking over their shoulders at the TUV. They're looking over their shoulders at Alliance. They have totally ballsed up their handling of Brexit. They're totally despised by certain parts of unionism. And if you read, by the way, Susan McKay book on Shifting Ground, which I've just finished there earlier this week. The DUP are despised by many people because of their incompetence and their handling of the whole Brexit thing. So, Jude, come May time, they had to be seen to be doing something decisive. So this is their big throw of the dice.
Well, in what way is that? I mean, not just something decisive, but something decisive and desirable. So they'll be made look good. Does this make them look good? I'm not sure that pulling.
If you were a unionist, to make some. Well, I saw the Vox Pops and Larne and various places last night on BBC. Oh, they had to do something, and all the rest. And like they're throwing out, as someone pointed out this morning, that the whole thing about the protocol could still be sorted out. There was, they were still negotiating with Britain and so on. And far from the EU have given a lot, have moved considerably. There was a lot of easement and so on. So this sort of thing, that there was no solution on site, and throwing it out as if it was never going to happen. That's rubbish, absolute rubbish. They've sorted out, they've moved a hell of a lot, and they've got a whole lot of progress. But this was an international agreement signed by their government, the UK government, with the EU. So it's almost as if the nationalist parties and Dublin were to blame for this.
Well, to me, I'm wondering if they're trying to set themselves up as having echoes of the Ulster Covenant. You know,
Yeah,
Britain makes their claim they're going to have things a certain way. In this case, it is that they signed up to the withdrawal bill, or the withdrawal agreement. Putts and Given and Donaldson particularly want to look as if they're prepared to stand up to anybody, including the British government.
yeah,
I mean, that is such a mistake, really. I think that's a serious, serious mistake. I'm
Yeah.
not sure that there will be enough time even, first of all, the British government will suit itself, not Jeffrey Donaldson. And secondly, it doesn't make Jeffrey Donaldson look particularly good, because what is he going to do? What is he going to do apart from pull down? They say, look at me, I pulled down Stormont.
yeah.
So what? You haven't changed the withdrawal.
Let me put it into perspective for you. You'd think this was seismic as far as we're concerned. I watched Question Time on BBC last night. It didn't even make a question on BBC. That's how far down Northern Ireland is. If this was seismic and earth-shattering on the mainland, it would be unbelievable. But Jude, it didn't even make a question. It's all on the mainland. It's all about Boris Johnson and what's happening there. Not even Ukraine, by the way. So, I think of people like Donaldson and Sammy Wilson and Poots thinks, Britain, the English nationalists will do what's best for them, and they're not going to let sort of 900,000 Protestants in the north or unionists dictate to 50,000 English nationalists or 50 million English nationalists what they will do in regard to Europe. They will do what's best for them.
Yeah, but Pat, what? I'm just trying to figure out what advantage Donaldson saw in pulling the plug now, rather than as he promised on the 21st of February, or having not pulled the plug at all, just waited till May and gone into elections. Where was the advantage?
No, Jude, it's all about
Where is the advantage?
Advantage for them is he's now playing to the gallery. He's playing to the home support. That's what it's all about.
He always does. Every politician does that.
In fairness to the DUP, a lot of political parties play to the gallery. Ian Paisley had a career, but he didn't give a monkey's what Europe thought of him, what Ireland thought of him. As long as the people in Ballymena and Hull were voting for him, he played to that gallery. And that's what Jeffrey's doing. The unions don't like it. They're unsettled. The protocol has put a sort of, as they say it, a sort of a line down between Britain and the UK, or UK and Northern Ireland. Jude, this is about constitutional. Yesterday, Jeffrey came out with all sorts of these statistics that he didn't really attribute to anybody, and they're seriously disputed. About losing 100,000 every hour, wherever it is. Jude, there's two sets of figures apparently that there's a lot of new doors opening up type thing that Jeffrey didn't calculate on those figures. Now, I don't know how true that is, but the whole thing, as far as I can see, is he's playing to a gallery that's worried about the constitutional position, and who's the guy riding up on the white horse? Jeffrey Donaldson. And
that's true, but he could have ridden up on the white horse, Pat, on the 21st of February. That was his deadline, and suddenly it's no longer his deadline. His deadline is yesterday. I don't quite figure that.
That's why I wonder, look, Jude, a lot of this, I think it's internal rank or internecine fighting within the DUP. Poots has lost his seat, by the looks of it. He was humiliated when he was the leader for 21 days or something, and so on. He's the minister. He said Jeffrey had given him an undertaking or a nod and a wink that he'd be looked after when he went down to, was it South Down, and was it Forsyth or someone's name, got the nod rather than him, and he's out now out of his own and he's Lagan Valley seat. So Jude, there's a lot of I'll use the term, a lot of shit going on in the background. That's the only way you can describe it. And it's a lot of infighting, and it's got very dirty. So what do? You cover it up by sort of attacking the other side.
I'm beginning to think that my initial statement, and you've implied it as well, that Poots pulled the plug, Given is his mate, and Donaldson sort of had to follow almost rather than be a leader.
Well, I don't know, Jude, but it just it struck me as odd that suddenly it all come crashing down very, very quickly. And some of the pundits yesterday, now they were all sort of suggesting it was coordinated, and it probably was. But the thought occurred to me: did Puts on pull the first false, first stitch, and the rest unravelled?
Yeah. Well, the appearance they give up to me, I could be wrong now, they do give me the appearance of angry and frightened children, really throwing the toys out of the pram because they can't get things their way, despite the fact that they built the bloody pram. They, were the people who made Brexit possible. An interesting thing I noticed was that the UUP was very quickly mentioned in the news immediately after the news that the DUP had pulled the plug. They didn't go. I thought they would have gone to Naomi Long as being the sort of main challenger for the DUP, but they went to Doug Beattie, and I was thinking Doug Beattie must be the happiest man in all of Ireland, if not these islands, because he talk about a good day to break bad chauvinistic news. He really was up a gum tree with that one. He seemed to be a lifelong misogynist and all racist and all sorts of things. And he was admitting that I could believe it too, because he was a soldier and they probably have a pretty crude view on anybody who isn't the same as them, including of the same gender. But Doug Beattie, now I think to some extent that's forgotten. And Doug Beattie saying, "You fools, what a stupid thing to do. You shouldn't have done it."
Doug was getting accused of all sorts of things. Now, I'm not so sure he is all those things, but like Doug, Doug must be clapping his hands and so because he was just going to be enveloped in one controversy after another. Now suddenly the focus is totally off him. And as well as that, by the way, the other sort of thing, as far as I can see, the only people plugged in this Brexit thing all the time, this protocol thing, is the DUP. The SDLP are happy with it. Sinn Féin are happy with it. As far as I know, the Alliance are happy with it, and so on. And even the UUP are sort of saying that, like the negotiations, let's work it out, and so on. That there was
I think they've been a wee bit. That last party, it was a wee bit more lukewarm than the others.
Lukewarm. I'm not bad, but they're not plugging it the same way. But by the way, Jude, let's get one thing clear. That everybody see when this thing was originally introduced to Article 6 protocol. Do you remember this? Arlene Foster sort of said, "This is okay, we can work with it." It was only afterwards when the more hardline, the Sammy Wilsons and so on, that the tune started, or Jim Allister, that the tune started to change. So you sort of wonder now, is this all to do? But by the way, I'm going to correct myself, Jude. This is all about the constitutional position, Jude. It's not to do with economics or anything else. It's all to do with constitution.
Well, I partly agree, Pat. I think it certainly is. That's the thing that's worrying them most. And Jeffrey's right. I would sympathise with him to some extent. It is making the North closer to the rest of Ireland than it is closer, more integrated with the UK, because the UK is going one economic road and they're going another. But at the same time, I sort of have sympathy, well, a certain amount of sympathy for him in that he's right. But he's the one he made it possible in the first place by supporting and acting a cheerleader. In fact, being involved with some would say, dodgy funds to make sure that Brexit was given sufficient headwind around London and so on. So, they really don't have anybody to blame. I have a feeling the British government will keep things limping on until near May. I'm not sure that they'll have an early election, probably because Mary Lou called for an early election along with Donaldson. So I have a suspicion the British government mightn't bother. What do you think yourself?
I don't quite get why the SDLP, are opposing an early election. Like, I don't see the difference.
Did the SDLP say they were opposing?
Well, the public guests, Claire Hanna and I heard Nicola Malin on yesterday. They were sort of lukewarm about it. I don't quite know what their thinking or strategy is. Maybe they sort of want to give it time and let's see what works out. I really genuinely don't know. I don't understand why. But Jude, I heard Sammy Wilson on RT this morning, and he's basically saying, well, they can still make decisions and they can still do this, and the ministers can still do that. So Claire Burns says to him halfway through it, if that's the case, why did you bother? But by the way, Jude, one other thing as well. I see now there's this spin going on from various DUP people that this 3-year budget, well, it doesn't matter. That was a Sinn Féin budget anyway, and all the rest of it. Jude, as far as I know, front, centre, and all the rest of it was health. Unless unionists don't get cancer and don't get mental health issues and don't get disabilities or heart attacks, I presume a health budget is there for everyone. And as far as I'm aware, by far the biggest item on the 3-year budget was health.
Well, that was very good. I think that was very good, sensible thinking on the part of Conor Murphy, and also very good political thinking. Because everybody's going to respond to the guy who's
but I heard last night it described as a Sinn Féin budget, so it doesn't matter. And I heard Sammy trying to spin it this morning the same.
Yeah. Well, do you think they'll limp on to May, or do you think there'll be an early election, Pat? Yes or no?
No, I think they'll probably limp on to May. Jude, the last thing what Boris Johnson needs right now in the British government is a whole uproar in Northern Ireland and destabilising what they'll just keep the Branton Lewis will keep it limping along and so on in the whole election. I presume Boris wants to get these really humped months out of the way because he is in deep doo-doo.
Yeah. Well, just before going to him, what about this meeting that Sinn Féin called and all the parties were to attend except the DUP, and Alliance said they weren't going to do that. They should have invited the DUP in. Would you say that's a reasonable point for Naomi Long to make?
I do, Jude. If we're going to live in Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland, Jude, inclusive, the only way forward, Jude, is everybody together. And I don't see how you can get around that. And you can't, if it was the other way around, let's put it like this: if everybody was invited except Sinn Féin, I would think that nationalists would sort of say, even though they're not going to attend, or the DUP I'm talking about, and if they're going to oppose, that's not the way. You still should send them an invitation.
Well, I don't know if I'd agree with you on that one, Pat. I think it was Conor Murphy I heard this morning on the radio, and he was saying, these are the people that created a problem. So those of us who didn't want to have that problem, we should try to sort out what we can do about it. I thought that was an initial statement.
Jude, the optics of that in Northern Ireland just aren't right.
You think so? Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was perfectly reasonable. It never crossed my mind that it would be seen as a minus thing not to invite the DUP.
Can you imagine if you're in Ballymena or Portadown or a DUP supporter and saw the UUP going along to a meeting with Sinn Féin while DUP or Alliance? The optics of that, I can understand Conor Murphy. Of course it can, and I can understand these people created the problem. So how do we resolve it? I can understand it, but I don't think that's only in a personal opinion.
Yeah, well, all that we say is personal opinions. But I think it's noticeable that was Naomi Long was the one who was first out of the traps to say that was a bad thing to do, to not include the DUP. Yeah. You see, I think Alliance has to walk that wobbly tightrope.
Yeah, well, that tightrope.
Union is it must stay sufficiently on side.
But look, you can imagine, right? Go and take it. Just move it a step forward, just another yard down there. Can you imagine if that went ahead? The DUP right away they would play that as look at the sectarianism and the bigotry of Sinn Féin and the others. We're excluded. Another example of what we're going to be treated like in a United Ireland. That's how they would play it.
Perhaps. Anyway, the assumption is that Jeffrey hopes that this will somehow give him kudos.
Resurrect his career again.
Anyway, would you say finally then that it might not pay off?
Jude, I am. Sammy, let me go back to that this morning again. Sammy said, when asked by Claire Byrne on RT's The Claire Byrne Show, said, what would you do if Sinn Féin becomes the largest party at the next election? Sinn Féin are not going to become the largest party. They're in denial, Jude. They're not. I think the DUP, it's a Rubicon, Jude, for the DUP. It really is.
Should be, but Pat, I wonder though, would it translate into seats? Because that's what matters. like the
Yeah.
Americans, where Hillary Clinton was hit 1 million votes more than Trump, but didn't become president. Is this a case? Could this be a case similar that
It could be, Jude, like if the DUP get out of the vote the same as they did the last time. Remember Ireland got, I think, 1 seat more than they was expected, and suddenly the DUP were
back in business.
Back in business. Now, whether they can bring the rabbit out of the hat again for a second time, this time. Now, I'm referring back again to that Susan McKay book. There seems to be maybe when they're I don't like them, but they're our only choice. Maybe that's what a lot of unionist voters might be saying. But there was a serious disillusionment about the whole handling of the Brexit thing, about the way they had handled the protocol, about everything. Now, Jude, that thing Jim Allister's on 12%. I think the DUP were on 18%, and Sinn Féin are on 25%. Now, 12% for a one-man band like Jim Allister. Now, I don't know, can he replicate 4 or 5 Jim Allisters in other seats? I don't know. So the DUP might get those votes anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, there was. Well, they did a bit better after the initial shock, where the TV, I think, was even matching them. They've certainly gone up. It'll be very interesting to see. This is the time of year, or this is the time of the politics season that makes it worthwhile to be talking about politics.
Let's go.
Let's go across to to Britain, where Johnson, Boris, what's his real name? He's not really Boris at all. He's something. His first name's
Boris de Havilland.
No. He had a name before that. He was known as that until he was about 18. Alfie or something.
But he's got a French name.
Oh yeah, two F's or two P's together.
Or something like that.
Okay. He can't help that. That's not to blame him. Not to blame him for that. Anyway, a lot of his staff in number 10 have been cleared out. Now, the only one question I think essentially is, were those rats, metaphorically, leaving the sinking ship of Boris, or were they people who were cleared out by Boris because he said he was going to really sort things out in Downing Street, and all these people were doing bad things like holding parties behind his back?
No, I don't buy it. It's got the whiff of the chaos on like Trump in the final days. People leaving because they were scared of what was going to happen. It seemed yesterday at least 3 of the people left of their own accord, that they just don't want to be tainted. Now, there might have been one sort of, there's one guy apparently had an arrow on his back, as he called Doyle or someone. He was the guy, one of the organized
invitations.
Invitations. So he was he probably said, hey, time to walk before I'm pushed. But, the advisor, whose name escapes me totally, she apparently told Boris, don't say that about Jimmy Savile to Sir Keir Starmer. And of course, when that blood was up and he came out with it. Now, I see yesterday he's trying to roll back on it. But what is it? There's 2. One MP definitely resigned about it. He says this is basically disgusting, sort of, and it's totally, they're lowering the standards. Dude, Boris, I don't understand how anybody in the Tory party can stand up for Boris. But Jude, let me refer back to one.
Because he gets votes, because he wins votes. That's fine.
But hold on. But Nadine Dorris, the culture secretary, was on Monday night on Channel 4, and she did an interview. If you want to find, like I did media studies years ago, if you want to tell young students how to define a car crash interview, get Nadine Dorris interview what he called Gertrude Murty, the guy who was superb on Channel 4. Krishna Gertrude, I think I can't remember the name. He's the guy that took over from Jon Snow, and he absolutely nailed it. And your final line was, "The Prime Minister always tells the truth," and you just go, Jesus Christ, like how anybody can say that as a senior minister with a straight face, and in other words, I think Tory ministers are a bit like Trump supporters. They just tell you, they lie to you straight in the face and sort of expect you to believe it.
Well, I think it wouldn't just stop with Tories. I think the other politicians do the same thing. because there was two on last night. We'll talk about them briefly for a moment. In a moment, Owen O'Brien and Darragh O'Brien, the housing minister, Fianna Fáil, and they were saying that's such and such happened, and the other one saying no, that's not true, and I was saying it is true. So one of the two was lying. One of the two was lying. Anyway, just my point is
that's politics. But when someone turns around and says, the Prime Minister doesn't lie, Jude, he's got sacked on 3 occasions for telling untruths. It's everyone in Parliament. Even Ian Blackford got chucked out. He actually said that the Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament.
But then I ask you a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever told a lie?
Daily.
Yeah, I do too. No, not daily. Like, certainly. Shouldn't we be so sore on politicians?
But when you're a political leader, you can't turn around and sort of point over to the leader of the opposition, knowing full well that he had nothing to do with the decision about Jimmy Savile, and sort of and smear him like that. That is not the sort of thing a political leader. You should stick to the politics, not personal smears, but you know are untrue.
It's very interesting. You were talking about media studies. That is a classic example of trying to link two things without saying you're linking them.
Yeah.
Linking pedophile with a respectable politician. Yeah. Eminently respectable, so respectable he's boring as hell. And just by naming the two of them, it's like having in your newspaper a picture of one, the story of a thief, and then somebody else's picture in another article beside it.
Jude, it's that mentality. I am not saying you beat your wife, but
yeah. Anyway, Richie Sunak, I thought his was the most interesting statement. He said he was asked about Boris's what he'd said about Starmer, and he says I wouldn't have put it that way, or I wouldn't have said it myself. That was interesting. That was seriously interesting. Because he didn't have to say that. Did you know, by the way, here an interesting fact about Richie Sunak? Richie Sunak is very wealthy because he was a financier.
He's worth 650 million, by boy.
Did you know that his father-in-law is a billionaire?
Yeah.
It must be nice to be that way. I think I'd go into politics myself if I had that kind of money behind me.
He was a hedge fund manager, and his wife's father is a billionaire, and apparently he and his wife are worth 650 million, and they're going to increase the national insurance charges for workers.
Well, if it all goes pear-shaped, they'll have something to fall back on. That's one good thing. Okay, let me talk about a program you didn't see last night, but I saw it. And maybe your thoughts on it. It was prime time on RTE, and it was about housing. On Tuesday, they did a program about housing with all sorts of facts and figures. And last night they did housing again. And they brought in Owen O'Brien. They built it up as if it was a Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier.
Joe Frazier, yeah.
That they'd sparred and clashed in the Dáil, but they hadn't done it on TV. And what do you think in general terms of Owen O'Brien as a TV performer?
O'Brien's very good, very clever guy, Jude. And and he's a very good media performer. I've heard him on the radio saying we are starting to build so many things. We come out from scratch. We are now on the process, and we're getting on top of it. It takes time.
Are you talking about O'Brien or O'Brien?
O'Brien.
Yeah.
And so on. And then 2 months later, O'Brien comes in and points out there are more on the waiting list than ever before, that rents are sky high, that a generation will never be able to afford a house. And you're going, Jesus, wait a minute. One's saying we're building more houses, and he seems factually correct. Yeah. And so on. And you're going, when you're finished, you're going, I am no further forward, and who's winning this debate than the man on the moon?
Well, it was an interesting one last night. I don't think it was a draw. I think Owen O'Brien won it, but because he said a few things. One of the lines he had was Darragh O'Brien was saying something about something would happen the next election or something, and O'Brien just tossed in. He said, "Is that the next election for leader of your party?" That kind of little lobbed hand grenade worked very well, I thought. But O'Brien knows this subject so thoroughly. The thing is, the people listening to him will be people who are desperate. They're desperate. The way things are is desperate for them. And here's a guy who sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and he's saying, I will solve that problem, or we will really tackle that problem seriously. I think the way people will say is, who's in power? O'Brien and his mates. What situation do I find myself in? I'm up the creek, and here's O'Brien, who's not in power, and he's saying, I have a plan. I think they'll go with that.
I think they will too. Here's the thing. O'Brien is basically encyclopedic. He's almost, well, not almost, he's an academic. He has got the facts, figures, the details about the whole housing thing. He's unbelievably on top of the detail. Now, there used to be a policy in the Republic of Ireland that the government built social housing. And Jude, it wasn't the most successful thing, but it put on a sort of floor for people that there was always a council house for people. Around about somewhere about 1980s, maybe earlier, they stopped this and they let the market decide. And suddenly there were housing estates going up on the outskirts of every town and village in the country, and people were getting 100% mortgages and stuff like that. And then, of course, as the usual, the arse fell out of the market. And now, but anyway, bottom line is, Jude, in Dublin, Cork, Galway, unless you have about 2,000 a month, you can afford that for a house. You won't be able to get to rent one. The housing stock has fallen down. People are now living back with mum and dad. You'd need, what is it, about 40,000 deposit euros before you even start. So it's the bank of mum and dad gives you the money. People who have, parents who have saved up are giving their life saving to their children to get on. So Jude, you're 100% right. Almost a generation have lost out in housing, and they're the people who will be supporting Eoin Ó Broin.
Okay, I think we'll have to pull a plug on this one, except that we keep forgetting about the anchor of the week. Yeah, we did have an anchor of the week, anchor of the week award, and we have been remiss in our duties in nominating one. Have you one for today? Have you done your homework?
As far as I'm concerned, there's only one, but you're never going to agree with this. But Boris Johnson, he could win it every week, as far as I'm concerned. Like, to call somebody deliberately smear somebody with comparing him or sort of aligning him with Jimmy Savile, as sort of a known paedophile, and doing it deliberately after being told by an advisor, don't do it beforehand. You see, everybody thinks that is off the cuff and it's all, but this woman resigned because she said he had obviously discussed it with her beforehand, and he totally ignored her advice, and and so on. Jude, that would be my wanker of the week.
You'd have worked him. Anchor of the week. Well, I think a good runner-up, I'd largely agree with you, but a good runner-up is Edwin Poots, because Edwin Poots said, there was to be no more checks, sent out the order, no more checks on, what is it, medical supplies, or was it agricultural goods or whatever. No more checks. No more. And the next minute you look around and he finds 2 or 3 days later, they're still checking. Yeah. And he then said, there's some financial matters have to be worked out. It wasn't nothing to do with financial matters. So I think in terms of runner-up, we definitely give honourable mention to Mr. Edwin Poots, former, I was going to say former politician, but former leader of the DUP. Okay, Pat. Have a nice weekend, my man. And we will talk on Monday. I wonder, will there be any other countries thrown into disarray between now and Monday?
God knows.
Because they're in disarray here in the north.
As long as Ukraine stays quiet, I'll be happy enough.
Okay, Pat, right.